Let's begin.
Hello and welcome to Pods Above Replacement, part of the Padres Hot Tub Podcast Network. My name is Raphie Cantor. I am the producer of Padres Hot Tub, and joining me from the Mile High City, he's waiting to hear if he passed his medicals. It's John Precoda!
Me and AJ Preller both believe that all doctors are quacks anyways, so I don't even know if medicals are worth checking. I think that we can just bypass that portion of a trade.
We were talking right before we hit record, just about how it's hilarious that like AJ Preller was the one holding up a trade over medicals, like, you know, how the turntables, so to speak. But we're here. You will not be shocked to know that we are back specifically to talk about Juan Soto Trade 2.0, Electric Boogaloo. The only thing I have to say about our layoff time, John, is that bullying works, because Craig has been shitting on us for not recording, and here we are. So I don't know if you have any feelings or sensitive spots that Craig touched within you about the bullying, but certainly to hit me somewhere.
I'm just gonna go out and say, doing deep dives every week during the off season is a large ask, I think.
Yeah, I don't think people really want to hear about like Jay Groom walking 8 guys per 9 innings. So like, and that's all we have to say about him, I mean, we actually will have probably much less to say about him now than we would have had if this trade hadn't happened. So
thank
I guess
God. Oh my God.
You can be thankful for that. Exactly. Very, very brief housekeeping. We hope you're watching us on YouTube as always. I don't know if you've checked, by the way, John, since we haven't talked about this in a while. We're getting pretty close to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. It's very exciting.
Nice.
So I think we're in like the 930 range right now. So you can be 930.
Come on, 70 people.
If you have
Get 70 friends, everybody.
Exactly. If you're going to be in San Diego, I meant to ask you this before we hit record. Are you going to be in San Diego on December 22nd?
No. I think it's going to be,
okay.
I think I'm going to be in on like December 23rd, actually.
Oh, damn.
Maybe.
Okay,
I don't know. It's close. I might.
It's close. But if you are going to be in San Diego on December 22nd, I will be in San Diego on December 22nd. So will Craig. So will Chris. We will be at the Till 2 Club sometime around, 6 or 7 p.m. to do like a little PHT holiday get together. And then Tim Capello is playing, which I don't know if I'm going to stay for. But certainly Craig and Chris will. I might have to be driving back to LA that night. So that's, but
it doesn't bring back good memories.
No, it doesn't. This is the thing where they're like, we got to see Tim Capello. I'm like, guys, it didn't work. It didn't work.
A piano's going to fall on them. We might have to save them.
Yeah, he's just going to go on stage and step on like 100 rakes, and that's going to be the whole show. But anyway, we've drawn on long enough. We're going to talk about the Soto and Grisham. I feel bad for Trent Grisham, by the way. I didn't even research that at all. I didn't even think about it. That's funny. Yeah, very much the also ran in this trade. But we're going to talk about the Soto and Grisham trade and what we got back. And, we obviously had a live reaction show on Padres Hot Tub, just in audio form, not on YouTube. That was on our PHT Discord, which, of course, you can belong to by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Padres Hot Tub. Just $5 a month to get on there and be a part of the party. And I got to talk at length about how I felt, my immediate reactions, my emotions, and what I thought it portended for the future. And before we get into the nitty gritty, John, I just wanted to ask, how are you doing? How do you feel about what happened this week in Padres land?
It's. I don't think that it was a poor decision, which makes me happy that we're not making poor decisions. It is obviously hard because it was very exciting last year to just think about those top 4 plus HSK, and there's going to be a little bit less excitement, I think, this year, but maybe we need a little bit less excitement because that was a high level of excitement that quickly fell right on that rake. That was just a fall off. So maybe it's good for us. We'll have a little bit maybe lowered expectations that will be easier to reach. But we did need pitching, so we traded for I think a close to equivalent value trade while also specifically targeting players that we need, because I was so curious how we were possibly going to solve the problem of starting pitching or just innings in general when we apparently had no money and needed like 6 pitchers who could give you like 100 innings, like how could we possibly solve that? And this answered it. It is at least a solution, albeit not one that's like, wow, we won this trade by a ton, in my opinion.
Yeah. So just to recap for people, the Padres traded Juan Soto, 1 year of Juan Soto, who is set to become a free agent at the end of 2024, and 2 years of team control in Trent Grisham, who is 2024 and 2025, to the Yankees. And in return, the Padres received Drew Thorp, pitching prospect, Michael King, very much a active pitcher, Johnny Brito and Randy Vasquez, and backup catcher Kyle Higashioka. So the thing to know right off the top about this trade and what we got back, all 4 of the pitchers who we got back conceivably could be starting pitchers for the Padres. That doesn't necessarily mean we want them to be. I want to make that very clear, but they could be. And that is, I think, the most important thing, because as I noted in the Discord earlier this week, our rotation up to this point was, Yu Darvish, Joe Musgrove, and a box of sparklers, basically. Like, we didn't have, unless you really, John Precoda and I, of course, are founding members of the Waldron Cauldron, but, I don't think that is necessarily in Matt Waldron's or the Padres' best interest to have him as our number 3 starter, let alone, Pedro Avila, never been to the major leagues, Jay Groom. I mean, this is the second Jay Groom mention in like 7 minutes, which is, already probably a little too much. So this moves everyone down the bench, which is super, super, super important going into next year. I'm curious, before we start talking about specific trade values, what do you think is next for the Padres? Like, what is the next move that you would want them to make?
Well, there's 2 outfield spots that we need to solve, right? But even more than that, I would still say another arm is important, because you could do replacement level like waiver claims for an outfield and still have probably an average lineup, I would say. Especially for like if you get like corner outfielders who are like, most of them are going to hit close to like 90 WRC plus or more, right? And if you put those at the bottom of your order, you're still going to have a decent lineup with the guys that we have constructed in the infield and at catcher. So the innings race is always going to be the problem, and that's the thing that we need to solve, in my opinion. So getting some guy who could slot in at 3 or 4 is still the number 1 priority to me. And I think we probably will. We certainly have now with this trade an ability to trade prospects that would have been a little bit more of a hard sell, 2 weeks ago. And I think that either via trade or free agency, although the free agent market is terrible right now in terms of like how expensive it is and how much money we have to spend, I think one of those avenues will lead to a 4-starter, a 3-starter, whatever. So I think we probably will solve it, but I do think that that's the thing that I'm most concerned about, more than even going into spring training with a decent outfield.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Again, the not only is the free agent market expensive, but it is also incredibly pitcher heavy right now. So I mean, if you wanted to get a good hitter, I mean, who's left really? I mean, you're looking at Bellinger, and I don't really know who, and that's not a move that I want really the Padres to make. I know that they need to get lefty bats. They have no lefty bats really left. They have Jake Cronenworth, who might not even be with the Padres the way people are speaking about him, come 2024. So I think lefty corner outfield bats, especially if they're able to move Tatis to center field, which I would be a fan of, by the way. Not only do I think he can do it, I think he'd be really good at it. And, the premium that you get of having an offensive contributor like Tatis in center field, and like you said, being able to bring cheap, even waiver pickup corner outfield bats, is such an advantage over, oh, okay, like, we'll bring in a Michael A. Taylor or a Harrison Bader who's going to play good center field defense, but is going to be, maybe not to the degree Trent Grisham 2.0, but Trent Grisham 2.0 in the sense of like you have a black hole in center field offensively, defensively in terms of them sucking up baseballs, and also offensively in the sense of not contributing. So let's transition to talk about what the Padres gave up in terms of value and
one more thing.
Yeah.
What is the okay? So 3 names: Bader, Marcy, Lee. What is the % chance that you think one of those guys will be our center fielder on opening day? If you had to put a % down.
I think I would go 50 Lee, 30 Bader, and 20 Marcy.
So 90%? Or no, that's 100%. So is that what you said? 50, 30, 20? So you 100% think one of those 3 will be our center fielder?
Sorry, I didn't realize that. I thought you meant between the 3 of them.
No, I meant like one of those 3. What is the chance that you think they will be our starting center fielder? At least one of them.
I mean, I would still put it quite high.
Yeah, me too.
I would put it in the 85% range.
Yeah.
What do you think?
And then for each of those 3, I also think it's like, I would say like 75%. But for each of those 3, how happy would you be with them being the center fielder? So Bader, Lee, and Marcy.
Well, I think we'll have a really interesting Jung-Hoo Lee episode if the Padres end up signing him. I'm reticent to actually do that episode if we don't sign him. We're not going to preemptively do the Jung-Hoo Lee episode. First of all, I think athletically he can absolutely do it. Like Fernando Tatis Jr., he was a converted infielder who then, moved to play in the outfield and has been a standout and has won the Korean equivalent of the gold. They call it the Golden Glove, not the Gold Glove. They have the Golden Glove. So he's won that a few times in center field. I think just from we need someone who can play a good defensive center field. That's great. I think he would be fine there. I don't know offensively if he's going to give you much. Like, he's obviously going to have an adjustment period like Ha-Seong Kim. He was also not as strong of a hitter as Ha-Seong Kim in the KBO in terms of overall production. He's much more of a contact guy. He didn't, he only in his MVP 2022 season in the KBO had like a good deal of pop. I think I think contact is what the team needs. I actually think in the wake of Soto being traded, I've actually been thinking a lot about that thing that you talked about, the like hits per plate appearance stat that you gave, and talking about how that's something the Padres lacked. That was something that I think we were promised in Soto that we actually never really got. That like not only does he walk 20% of the time, but he also hits for contact. And I actually don't really think we saw a lot of that from him. And I think that like, we're sorely going to miss Soto's on base. I think people are underrating like that element of it, but I don't think that we did get the contact from him that we thought we were getting. Is that how you feel?
Yeah. I mean, that whole thing, I will not stop thinking that lack of folks that have a base hit approach did not contribute to our just absolutely poor hitting in all clutch opportunities, because you need somebody to get the actual hit, right? You always do. And nobody ever got the actual hit. And so that being said, we did get rid of like the 2 guys who are like the mainstays of 3 true outcomes. And so now you could argue that we almost need somebody who's a little bit more on base. Because if you think about it, now we're like pretty contact forward. Like Xander's pretty contact forward. Tatis is certainly pretty contact forward. Manny is. I mean, Ha-Seong Kim is a little bit in between. So we don't really have a ton of guys that are like super walk forward. Unless you count Carpenter, which you shouldn't.
You shouldn't. You absolutely should not. So let's transition to talking about the value, the surplus value in this trade. I'm going to break down the Yankees side, and then we should just talk about that for a second before we get to what the Padres got back, because that's going to get pretty wonky. So very simply, by the way, all the projections we're about to use are from Steamer. which is one of Fangraph's many projection systems. They've released all their projections for 2024. Zips, which is our preferred projection system, released their projections for the Padres players. So in this case, Soto and Grisham. But they had not yet released their Zips projections for the Yankees roster. So we don't have Zips projections for, King and Higashioka and Thorp and all those guys. So I figured it would be better just to use the same projection system, which is still good and still respected. It's just not our preferred. But I just wanted to clarify that so that you're seeing some of the numbers that we're going to get, because this number jumped out at me. Steamer projects Juan Soto in 2024 to put up 6.8 WAR. Which is wild. Again, it's just a good reminder that is why so many people were upset that we were trading him. And, it's guys like that don't get traded. Like, truly, they don't get traded.
Yeah.
The fact that he's been traded twice in his major league career before he's hit free agency is absolutely remarkable. Trent Grisham, in the same projection was the same system, Steamer was projected to put up 1.2 WAR this year, which I think is fair. Part of that is because they cut his plate appearances down to 260 in their projection, and I think that is fair because he's ostensibly going to be the fourth outfielder in New York. Which, if your fourth outfielder is Trent Grisham, that's awesome. That has for such a long time been how I wish we were able to look at Trent Grisham, but we obviously never got to that place. And we just never had someone who could play center field as well as he could. So 8 WAR this year projected going to New York, plus you assume a similar projection for Trent Grisham in 2025. You take the future WAR discount, which we have talked about before. You can go back and listen to some of our prospect evaluation episodes on that. But again, future WAR is not as valuable as present WAR. The value decays basically the longer in the future you're looking. Fangraphs estimates that it's about a 7% discount on WAR for the first year in advance that you're looking. So for 2025, we're going to credit Grisham with 1 WAR with that discount. So in total, in 2024 present day WAR, the Padres traded away 9.0 present day WAR. Assuming a valuation of $8 million per WAR, which is kind of what the benchmark is that Fangraphs has been using, that is $72 million in value. I bring that up. We want to look at stuff in terms of dollar amounts instead of necessarily present day WAR, because the dollar amounts in this deal are much, much different. The Yankees are receiving $72 million in production value, but they are paying $42.5 million for it. So it's a surplus value, that valuable part, of $29.5 million. So keep all of those numbers in mind. 9-day present WAR, $72 million in production, surplus value of $29.5 million. How does that feel to you? Are you feeling, what kind of emotions does that bring up before I talk about what we got back?
I don't know. It seems about right? That's 1 year of 25-year-old, would you argue that, any year besides, the 25, 26, 27 year are most likely to be, the best Soto years? I would say that those are probably the best Soto years. And we gave up one of a Hall of Famer's best projected years. That seems right? It's surplus cost of, at the end, after you pay for it, close to 30 million. That seems right.
Close to 30 million. And before I move on, I did want to give you an opportunity. Craig brought up something you said in the Discord earlier this week about kind of the prospect credit card coming due and what does it cost. And I thought this would be a great time for you to kind of elaborate on what you meant by that.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically that we keep trading away prospects for these major players, and what it ended up creating was a year, this year, in which we have no pitching prospects on the horizon. Snelling is 20 years old. That guy's not ready to contribute. Mazer might be the closest one. I think he's 22 years old, but only threw 37 or something like that innings in AA. He's not ready to contribute. Who exactly is ready to contribute? They're all also Rans that you don't think of as, oh, this guy's on the up and up. It's maybe they can provide innings, but the chances of them being successful are very low. Like Jay Groom in AAA, 8.55 ERA, Avila 8.57 ERA, and Matt Waldron 7.31 ERA in AAA. Like those are the guys you're just gonna throw into your rotation right now? Of course not. So we obviously have this gap, right? Probably a year, maybe 2 years between when like Mazer, Lesko, Iriarte, Snelling can contribute. We have this gap. And so what did we do with this trade? We filled the gap to where like these guys are basically the same level as those guys, but a couple years ahead in terms of like how old they are, how ready they are for the major leaguers or for the major leagues. And that's what we gave away. We do not have that grouping of prospects. And now it came back to bite us because we have no idea how to solve that problem. You have to trade away something. We traded 1 year of prime Juan Soto, a very likely future Hall of Famer. That's what we lost.
Yeah, and I wanted to contrast the Padres and the Yankees for a second because it's not only noteworthy that the Yankees had this much pitching sitting around that they could trade, without having to give up, a Jason Dominguez and Everson Pereira, like that type of prospect that they have in their truly upper echelons. But you'll remember just a day before the Juan Soto trade, they traded away 3 more pitching prospects to the Red Sox for Alex Verdugo. So like, when we talk about teams that had like very healthy pitching farm systems, the Yankees now, basically did what the Padres have been doing for the last several years by just going and cashing in their prospect capital and saying, okay, this is what we're going to do. And the Yankees are I would say up there with the Guardians and the Dodgers and the Rays in terms of organizations we think of as developing pitching talent. They even, think about deals which they didn't really get anything. Like the Frankie Montas deal, they got like 30 or 40 innings of Frankie Montas and he was bad and then he got hurt. And they still give away pitchers for that. So, it's a big contrast in terms of like where the two organizations were at the time of this trade. So with that being said, let's move on to talk about what the Padres got in terms of present day WAR, in terms of production value, and in terms of surplus value. And I want to start with the guys who were the closest to free agency because they're a little bit easier to break down, and then we'll get kind of a little bit more complex as we go. So Higashioka, backup catcher, his averages somewhere in like the 200 to 300 plate appearances per year range. For the Yankees, he'll probably get the same with us this year. He's projected to put up 1.2 WAR, which for a backup catcher, great. You take that. Absolutely fantastic. A lot of that is on the back of really good pitch framing. That's probably his best tool in his catcher tool belt. And we'll break that down more in depth later. And also a bat that is not good, but it's also not Austin Nola. Austin Nola and Austin Hedges. We had 2 Austin. I was like, they couldn't possibly both have been named Austin, but they were. We, like I said on the other show, we were so conditioned to bad, like not bad, but truly awful hitting at the catching position to have a guy who was probably going to give us like an 85 WRC plus. That's fine as a catcher.
Yeah, whatever. Backup catcher, fine.
Yeah, fine. So that's 1.2 WAR from Higashioka, and it's only going to cost us $2.3 million, which is very important. It's not a Gary Sanchez who would have cost us $8 million a year or something like that. Sure. Moving down the list, Michael King. He's projected by Steamer to put up 2 WAR. That comes in 144 innings, according to their projection. We'll talk about that later. And assuming, again, we're going to use that future WAR discount like we gave Trent Grisham, because King is slated to be with the Padres through 2025. We can project him at 1.8 WAR for 2025. For the sake of our exercise, that means 3.8 WAR. He's slated to make $2.6 million this year. Based off of that estimate, we can safely assume that a $3.9 million final year of arbitration puts his total cost at $6.5 million. So you're getting 3.8 WAR over 2 years for $6.5 million, also over 2 years. Moving down the list, I'm going to talk about Johnny Brito and Randy Vasquez kind of as a piece because they're both sort of similar pitchers of similar abilities. They have the same amount of service time, which is under a year. Vasquez is these guys are so similar in where they're at. I forgot which one is which. One of them is prospect eligible and one of them is rookie eligible and one of them isn't, but they're both still under a year of service time. That's the thing that's important. And they were both upon graduation rated as 40 plus pitchers by Fangraphs. And this is very easy for us to calculate because Fangraphs basically can tell you what a 40 plus pitching prospect is worth. And that's 0.3 present day WAR. Again, systems, normal, healthy major league systems, prospect systems tend to be more flush with these type of pitchers than the Padres have been, which is why you might think, wait, we got two of these guys and they're only worth a combined 0.6 present day WAR. What's that about? Well, when you're evaluating prospects, that's kind of how it works. These guys obviously are at the major league level. If you project a 40 plus guy in single A, he's not as valuable as a 40 plus guy who's in triple A about to hit the major leagues. But for the sake of this argument, again, let's just use Fangraphs evaluation because I'm going to do that same thing for Drew Thorp. Now, Drew Thorp is the prospect centerpiece of this trade. Michael King is the major league centerpiece of this trade, and Drew Thorp is the minor league centerpiece of this trade. He is valued currently by MLB Pipeline as being a 55 future value pitcher, which is right in the Robbie Snelling, Dylan Lesko range. I use Pipeline just because Fangraphs hasn't updated their rankings since the end of the year, and they still have Snelling as a 40 plus, and I'm like, that's not good. That's not what it's going to be. So this is kind of silly for me to do that. So I use Drew Thorp as 55 future value because that's what both Lesko and Snelling are on MLB Pipeline, and I put them right in the same range. I am going to use Fangraphs valuation for 55 future value prospect in terms of present day WAR, which is 3.7. 3.7 present day WAR for a 55 future value pitcher. So if you add all of that up, remember, we gave away 9 present day WAR to the Yankees. In return, we're getting back 9.3 present day WAR. So in terms of value, that is basically the same, 6 in one, half dozen the other. In terms of putting a dollar amount on that, that's $74.4 million. But this is where it matters the most for the Padres and where they're at in terms of their organizational cycle. The total cost through 2025, this year and next year of the deal is $12.5 million for the Padres. I use 2025 as a bookmark, as a bookend for it because we have no idea what Johnny Brito, Randy Vasquez, and Drew Thorpe are going to get in arbitration. We have no idea if they'll still be in the major leagues. It's kind of pointless to try and guess how much we're going to be paying them. But since both the pieces we traded away to New York will be free agents by the end of 2025, and 2 of the 5 we got back here will be free agents by the end of 2025, I figure it's a pretty safe kind of bookend in terms of a cost standpoint. So, our surplus value on this trade is $61.9 million per that math. So it's a big difference. We're getting back more surplus value than we gave away for the Yankees. But again, the difference is the Yankees get all of that production now. They get it in 2024. They get 8 of their 9 WAR this year, and then they get 1 from Trent Grisham next year. We have to wait basically until 2026 and beyond to get about half of our WAR in this deal. So it's a deferred sort of payment. It's a marshmallow test, if you will, of trades. The Yankees get 1 marshmallow now, the Padres get 2 marshmallows later, so to speak. How when we add all that up, when you look at my really shitty trick and scratch math, how does that feel? Taking all this in, John.
I mean, it does. I mean, all of these trades, I feel like when you trade for a superstar, it's going to be expensive for you, but their floor of the worst thing that could happen is that unless Soto just gets a catastrophic injury right away, which is rare for a position player, they're going to get that WAR, where ours is obviously a mean between 2 wild variable numbers that could be like very high if, you know, 2 of them take off, or extremely low if nobody pans out. So, like I said before, I think that it's even value. I think that if we were a team that consistently had a wave of prospects coming at all times, then we wouldn't have to make this trade, because basically we just got something that most organizations should kind of have at all times. But we didn't, and we need these. Everybody needs these. You need pitching depth. We didn't have it. I think that it was a smart trade. You can also look at it like, shit, we should have had that anyways, which I would also argue, yes, you should always have 2 40-plus, you know, grade prospects in AAA waiting to come up, and we don't have even close to that.
It is absolutely something that the Padres should just have sitting around in their pockets that they can kind of, you know, turn inside out and say, oh, you know, a Johnny Brito falls out or a Pedro Avila falls out. But unfortunately, that wasn't the position the team was in. I will say, who we are getting back in terms of Michael King is not necessarily someone that we would have just had laying around. The first thing to know about Michael King, he's 28 years old currently. He's about to go into his age 29 season. He was born on May 25th, which makes him a Gemini, ladies.
Can't trust him.
Is that, I don't know. Is that what that is? What do you think a Gemini is? Do you know?
It's like, you know, the incorrect term for bipolar, which is more like borderline, which is like you change your emotions really quick. That's normally what they call Geminis, is like people who have like 2 different personalities, kind of.
Okay. Well, I mean,
which is not what bipolar disorder is, by the way.
It's not what bipolar disorder is, but talk about someone with 2 personalities. How about you talk about someone who was both a starter and a reliever last year? How about that for a transition? Yes. Michael King threw 104 innings, 404 and 2/3 innings last year. And he split that mostly out of the bullpen, but he transitioned at the end of the year to starter. He had a lot of success as a starter. He threw 40 1/3 innings, put up a 2.23 ERA, but more importantly to us on this show, John, a 2.68 FIP. Very exciting. And most importantly, also to the Padres, he has 2 years of control left. So 2024 and 2025, he will be a starter for the Padres. And before I pass it over to you, I'll just read a quote from Eric Longenhagen, Fangraph's cheap prospect analyst, who put out a story this morning, which I recommend everyone go read, which is about, basically what the Padres got back in this trade. And he said, quote, "In short, so long as he has the stamina for it, Michael King is going to be an impact guy. He's an all-star caliber talent who elevates San Diego's rotation back into a respectable place and might be the Padres' best starter next year." So, John, give it to us straight. Is that, you think, in his bag?
Might is carrying a lot of weight in that sentence, but I do. I mean, he is exciting. You look at his numbers, there's literally nothing to be concerned about. He has a 4-pitch repertoire. Every single pitch is good. You can, increase the usage of one pitch, decrease the usage of another. It doesn't really matter. Any way you go, he has 4 good pitches, so something good is going to happen because he's a good pitcher. And he's been a good pitcher at the major league level. He's 28. He's, not outside of his prime. He's consistently been successful. His StatCast numbers show an insane amount of red. His pitch shapes are all the kinds of shapes that somebody who's been to like a lab would try to create. He has an insane amount of horizontal movements on some pitches. He has weirdly, like his sinker has like a weird amount of vertical movement, which every single pitch is different than you normally see from somebody, which is going to be something that hitters don't see as much, which is going to lead to success. So a 4-pitch repertoire where every single pitch is a little bit weird is going to make it so that he is likely to be successful with all 4 pitches, because you're never able to key in on basically anything. I don't have any fears about him in terms of success at all. I think that every inning that he pitches while he's healthy will be a good inning for the Padres. And not only that, but if he is somebody who makes it through the season and we make it to the playoffs, he is like the perfect playoff pitcher, where once you reduce him down to 1 time or 2 times through the order, his pitches are all going to be successful. You know, I put in the notes that he's like an anti-Clevenger Mania, where like those guys can get you regular season innings, but as soon as you put them in an atmosphere where everybody's keying in on every pitch, they're probably not going to be successful because they don't have dominant pitches. He has 4 pitches, each of which are good and would be successful in the playoffs. He's kind of the same mind in my thought process of what AJ Preller was trying to do last year with Seth Lugo and Nick Martinez, dudes that can give you starting pitching innings, but then once you get to the playoffs, they have pitches that can be successful in the playoffs, especially if you go 1 time through an order, maybe 2 times through an order. And he is of that vein, but to me, of a higher ceiling. And I think that the best comparison is probably to Seth Lugo. And he's a similar pitcher, right? All his pitches are quality, but he's been in the bullpen for a long time. In 2022, Seth Lugo threw 65 innings and then put up 146.1 innings. Ken King, who threw 50 more innings than Lugo 40 more innings, 104.2 innings last year. Can he get up to that 140 range? That's going to be what this all matters about, right? If he can get to 140 innings, if you get 140 innings of Michael King, you're going to get a ton of value. The only questions have nothing to do with what he has that he's throwing across the plate. It's all to do with like longevity. Is he going to be able to give you those 100 plus innings, 140 innings? He's going to be great. And is he going to get injured because now he's, pushing himself further past what he's ever had before? He had an elbow stress fracture recently that required surgery, did not require Tommy John. Are those medicals that held up the deal good or bad? And that's something that we'd only have to speculate on. Who knows, right?
Yeah. Just to give people an idea, in terms of the innings count we're talking about, in 2021, he threw 63 innings. In 2022, he threw 51. And last year, he threw 104 and 2/3. And Lugo threw less than those, I think, each of those years, was able to convert. Obviously, like we said, the Steamer projection had him at 144 innings. And had him putting up a 4-ish whip, a 3.86 ERA, 2 WAR in that. So if we get that, we should be happy. If we get anything, any more, inning contribution, then we should be very happy. And just an interesting thing you'll see on YouTube if you're watching right now, just the way that he's able to kind of morph and change between being a starter and a reliever. One thing you'll see is that, as a reliever, he has a really fantastic sweeper that he threw a third of the time. And that usage goes down to 22.4% as a starter and basically, gets completely filled in by leaning on his sinker more, about the same amount. He uses his 4-seamer and changeup equally as a starter and reliever, but, as a starter, he uses his sinker about 11% more than a sweeper and vice versa. So it'll be interesting. One thing I will say about Michael King is that he's clearly someone who came from a really strong pitching development organization. And unlike when really good hitters come to the Padres, and I worry that they will not be the same type of hitter that they were because we seem to be behind the 8-ball compared to other organizations from a hitting standpoint, I do not have that fear when it comes to pitching now with Ruben Diabla. Like, I really think that guys who have been good and have been in strong organizations will remain to be that way. And guys who were kind of diamonds in the rough, could come here and become just diamonds. And speaking of someone who could be that for us in the future, let's talk about Drew Thorp, the minor league centerpiece of this deal. Born on October 1st, 2000. He's 23 years old. It will be his 23-year-old season this coming year in 2024. He is a Libra. What does that mean, John?
That means that he's me. I'm October 2nd. So us Libras, we are the scales. We are people who are stable. And I think that he, based on his stability, will stably make his path forward into the MLB this year. I'm betting it's this year. I'm betting by June 1st, he makes his first pitch for us. That's what my bet will be.
June 1st. Okay, wow. All right. Do you want to have a little friendly gentleman's wager on this? You're saying you're going to take the...
Heck yeah.
Okay, cool. So you're saying before June 1st, and I'm going to say after. Cool?
I'm saying by June 1st, so I get the day June 1st.
You do get June 1st. Okay. So you get June 1st inclusive, and I get exclusive June 1st. So June 2nd and later. Okay, cool. We'll keep track of that. Keep tabs on that. People can yell at us if we don't bring it up when it happens. But Drew Thorp, this kid is a finesse god. Okay, that's the way that I would describe him. I'm going to lean once again on Eric Logenhagen's evaluation, which he said, pitchers with changeup as good as Thorpe's and who throw as many strikes as he does tend to be high floor propositions who pitch forever. His low 80s changeup has a ton of tail. He embodies mechanical repeatability, which helps him command it. And his ultra short arm stroke helps trick hitters into seeing fastball out of his hand. The effectiveness of Thorpe's slider, more average in terms of raw stuff, and fastball, below average at just 90 to 92 miles an hour, are enabled by his precise feel for location. We're talking about plus command of a plus changeup here. He will be an off-season top 100 prospect here at Fangraphs. So again, that last sentence is just music to the ears. Top 100 prospect coming into next season. One thing that jumped out at me when I heard Logenhagen talk about him is that he reminded me of how we thought of Chris Paddock as a prospect, which I think is a really good thing, because that was the Chris Paddock who didn't have any of the bullshit sheriff, ego and expectations that I think we all have a part in the sheriff thing. I think Paddock had his part in it, and I think we had our part, which was he came out in 2019 and had 2 hot months, and we were like, this guy is Jake Peavy. And then he ended up turning into what he probably was more likely going to be, which was like a 4-starter who sometimes gets injured. And we all were like, well, he's a failure. When really, I think like his projection was like a 3-4 starter. And so I think if we were to treat Drew Thorp in the same way and say, hey, this is a guy who has great control, has an amazing changeup. He threw 140 innings in single A and double A last year, combined to a 2.52 ERA, and is projected to be a 3-4 starter. If he's that for us, truly incredible. If Drew Thorp is the person that people think he will be, I will go so far as to say that we might have won this trade. It depends on if Soto signs forever to stay in New York to be a Yankee for life or not. But
does it? Because that has nothing to do with us. We weren't going to sign him forever. So what difference does it make? I mean,
that's a good point as well. That's a very good point as well. We can argue about that. That's more of a philosophical argument, but that's not. We're here to talk about Drew Thorp. John, what else do we need to know about Drew Thorp?
I was so pissed when I saw that you wrote that this was Chris Paddock in your thing, because that's like, the whole time. As soon as I saw anything about him, I was like, oh, this is exactly Chris Paddock. Like, just wildly similar to Chris Paddock. The same, he has a mediocre fastball with a plus changeup. And who knows if he's going to be able to spin anything. I haven't seen anything on his spin rates. I would really, really love to have that data if anybody has it, just to see what his ceiling kind of is, because as of right now, it doesn't sound like he has a great established slider, which is, I mean, we had to deal with that for years with Paddock. Like, oh, this year he might have a cutter. This year he might have a slider. This year he might have a curveball, right? But he couldn't spin the ball. So it was never going to happen. At best, it was going to be like a, major league just below average pitch that can keep you off the fastball and the changeup. But right now, he has basically what Chris Paddock had. And at a similar age to Chris Paddock before he ended up coming up to us, he does have low walk rates, but not the insanely low walk rates that Chris Paddock had, where he just never walked anybody in the minor leagues at all. But similar K rates, and we'll see, right? I think that he'll probably be similar to Chris Paddock. Everything to this point at the age of 22 is the same as minor league Chris Paddock. And I put up the difference in stats, but they're the same thing. It's 22 years old. Drew Thorp in Double-A had a 1.48 ERA. 22-year-old Chris Paddock in Double-A had a 1.91 ERA. Thorp has higher K rates but lower walk rates historically. Paddock had higher K rates than even Drew Thorp has now, but like I said, way lower walk rates. They're the same guy with the same repertoire. Hopefully he can spin a baseball. If he can spin a baseball, then that makes it likely that he could possibly be a second starter or a third starter. But as of right now, he's probably a fourth starter or fifth starter, which is fine. If he can do that for 6 years for cheap, then that's obviously incredibly valuable when we do not have that guy. If he's like the Michael Wacha or whatever, the Seth Lugo for us for a long time, and we don't have to pay $16 million a year for him, then that's obviously very valuable. And this is why I said June 1st or below. Like, he's basically the exact same pitch. Like, Paddock at the age of 22 threw 37 innings in AA, and Thorp threw 30 innings in AA last year, while also having 109 innings in A+, which was way more than Paddock had overall. And Paddock ended up starting the year with us in 2019 and throwing 140.2 innings. So, yes, we have more pitching. Actually, we don't even have more pitching than we did in 2019. So we have basically the same amount of pitching as we had in 2019. And Paddock immediately started the season. I think that if Thorp has a hot spring training, I would not be shocked if we, with our way too aggressive handling of pitching, just immediately put him on the roster. But to kind of pull back a little bit, I think that the likelihood of somebody not being successful when we have so many young pitchers on our staff, that makes it likely that at worst he will be called up in like May when somebody's struggling or gets injured.
I think that that's really fair. I think that, one of the things that jumps out at me about the stats that we have up right now is that Steamer and Fangraphs depth charts both project Drew Thorp as of now to come up and pitch 74 innings of 4.12 ERA ball, just based on the stats that he's already put up in the minor leagues last year, which if he does that, those are 74 very valuable innings to the Padres. We need 74 innings of 4.12 ERA ball in a very bad way. So I think we will be very happy. And by the way, I just want to confirm what you said. We did not have pitching in 2019. If my memory serves me right, I think our opening day starter was Eric Lauer in 2019.
Nice.
Was
it Luke Casey? Wait, was that before Luke Casey? I feel like Luke Casey beat Lauer out for, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like Luke Casey won that one.
It was like
a competition between
Luke Casey and Lauer. I believe Nick Margavishitz was still in there.
He started like game 4 or game 3.
Yeah, and he threw like 6 innings of 1-run ball. And we were like, oh, this is Margavishitz's guy, and I think he was like off the team by like 3 months later.
He threw like 84 miles an hour. Oh my god.
Yeah. Anyway, we should be excited about Drew Thorp. As excited you are about Robbie Snelling and Dylan Lesko, I'd say you can be just as excited about Drew Thorp. I think the chances that one of those guys like pans out and turns into a bona fide contributor for us is very high. I'm not saying all 3 will, but one of them, sure. You know what I mean? Like we have to, remember there's no such thing as a pitching prospect. And I would say that the chance that none of them pan out for us is low. That like all 3 are busts. Yeah. I think that's pretty low. And that's what you're doing with pitching prospects. Yeah, go ahead.
I would say that Thorp is the lowest of those all. Like, I think he's the most likely to be a 4th starter, whereas Lesko is the most likely to be a 2nd starter, and also he's the most likely to not ever throw a major league inning. Whereas Thorp is the most likely to throw major league innings like soon, but least likely to be a number 2. Like, I don't think he's going to be a number 2. I haven't seen what he can throw, if he can spin it, so I don't know. Maybe I'll change my mind when I see like some actual data on him. But as of right now, I think he'll be a 4th starter for 6 years for cheap, which is valuable.
Yeah. I mean, again, who knows? Maybe he comes to San Diego and he goes to Point Loma Nazarene with Ruben Yebola and they work in the biomechanics lab and he adds 2 ticks on his fastball, and then all of a sudden it's a completely different conversation. The bad part about guys that only throw 90 to 92 is that they have to be really precise and they have to have really good secondary pitches and they basically can't make mistakes. The really good part is they don't tend to blow out their elbows the same rate as guys who throw 99, 100 miles an hour do. And so that's kind of where the ceiling and floor starts to squish a little bit with someone like Thorp, where, it's like the chance that he completely busts and flames out and his arm is completely gone, is a lot lower than, like you said, someone like Lesko, who already has had Tommy John surgery before he even threw an inning of professional minor league baseball, let alone major league baseball. So, let's, keep our eyes on Drew Thorp. Again, it remains to be seen what value we will have bringing Drew Thorp to El Paso. If it's valuable to bring any pitcher to El Paso, just to,
don't do it. I say don't do it. Fuck it.
Honestly,
it's not worth it.
Maybe don't do it. How is it good for an organization to go somewhere where pitch shapes don't make sense and you're going to get blown up and you're going to put up like a 6 ERA? Like, that's not going to give you confidence right before you come to the major leagues. So, anyway, let's talk about a guy who will I will say probably be spending some time in El Paso, Texas, and that's Randy Vasquez. He is born on November 3rd, 1998. I believe that is maybe within a week of Juan Soto, something like that. He is just turned 25 years old. He is a Scorpio. I know what that one means. He's a little bit of a firecracker. He's a little bit of a very, I don't know. I just know when people say it's Scorpio season, like weird shit happens. So I'm going to lean on that. Vasquez is the one between Vasquez and Brito who is still I said that again, not prospect eligible, rookie eligible. He is still rookie eligible. Yeah. He only threw 37 innings last year in the major leagues. However, he threw 118 combined innings between AAA and MLB. I know that the old heads are going to look at his stat line from last year and see, he threw 37 innings of 2.87 ERA baseball in Yankee Stadium. Like, this guy's going to be great. You read the fine print. He had a 4.98 FIP on those same 37 innings. He's very much the definition of quad A. He is a long reliever, and he has 2 option years left on his contract, which is very important. So for 2024 and 2025, he could be shuttling back and forth between El Paso and San Diego. He could be shuttling back and forth between, the bullpen in left center field and the dugout, because he might be called upon to start, and he also might be called upon to be kind of in a mop-up role. I think Vasquez is someone who the Padres sorely needed, but he is not very sexy as a pitcher, John.
I am going to argue almost the exact opposite. Here's why. So Vasquez and Brito are basically the same value pitcher. As far as you elucidated it before, they're the same in terms of age. They're the same in terms of like how many innings they've recently thrown. They're, the same as in terms of like FIP at the major league level. All of those things have been incredibly similar between Brito and Vasquez, and I cannot think of 2 pitchers that I think of as more wildly discriminate to me going forward. And that's because Vasquez, in contrast to Brito, I think is the one who is sexier, but also might not do anything for us. Like, he might be out of the major leagues in 2 years, but also this is the one that could be like either late relief pitcher who's dominant, or a like pretty good like 2 to 3 times through the lineup guy who is like a valuable major league starter through his prime. And the reason why is because this dude can spin it like crazy. He has a over 3,000 spin rate on his breaking balls, which is like Lugo territory, which is just like, there's not that many pitchers that do that. His stuff plus on his sweeper last year was 132. Like, just, he has a disgusting sweeper because he spins it at an insane rate, especially for a slider sweeper. And his like makeup, the molding with which Niebla has to play is exciting. Like, that's some good marble that he can frame into the Pietà if Niebla can do it. And you see it just in his numbers, like as a starting pitcher and as a reliever. Like, the first time through, he had a 1.64 ERA. The third time through, a 10.80 ERA, and it was in like barely any innings. But who cares? Like, when he struggled, the reason why he has that near 5 FIP is because he walks everybody. His walk rate is very, very high. I think it was like it was 10.8 versus like a league average, just so you know, is 8.4. So 2% higher, 25% higher than league average in terms of his walk rate. And the reason why is because he has nasty breaking balls, but he can't ever get to them because his fastball is not that good. So, but you have a guy that can spin the baseball, And you could technically change it so that he's throwing those pitches in the strike zone. And in the same way that like Snell took off as soon as he was able to keep landing that changeup in the strike zone, when you have that nasty off-speed pitch that you like need to be able to get to, it behooves you to be able to throw a pitch in the strike zone before you get to those breaking pitches. And when you have 3,000 RPM breaking balls, I could see a way in which he can throw either a fastball with more rise or a cutter like Joe Musgrove did once he came over to us. I mean, Joe Musgrove had great spin rates, and then we gave him a cutter that he was able to command in the strike zone, and then he took off. I could see that happening for Vasquez as well, especially with Niebla, trying to change his pitch shapes when he already has so much spin. So I do think that he has kind of the higher ceiling. I think that we'll get to Johnny Brito in a second. I think that he has the higher floor. I am excited to see what happens with him, but I wouldn't get too attached because I do think that this guy might literally never be able to throw a strike.
Might never be able to throw a strike, and also I think the thing that, when I hear that he has crazy spin rates, the other thing that I worry about is an elbow injury. That's the other thing that which I hope that Ruben Niebla is kind of able to rein in a little bit, and maybe take some of the violence out of that delivery. But Johnny Brito, moving on to him, Johnny Brito is no longer rookie eligible. He threw 90 innings last year in the major leagues. He had 25 appearances, and literally almost half of those were starts and half of those were relief appearances. 13 starts. In total between, starting and relieving all those 90 innings, he put up a 4.28 ERA, a 4.74 FIP. Again, if he does that for the Padres this year, I will be happy. I will take 90 innings of 4.28 ERA from Johnny Brito every time. Longenhagen this morning compared him to kind of being our Nick Martinez replacement, specifically because he can shuttle back and forth in multi-inning relief from the bullpen to being a starter. And he is also someone like Nick Martinez who has a really good changeup that, when he becomes a reliever, he throws it upwards of 40% of the time. And, when he becomes a starter, he obviously throws it less. So that is something to keep your eye on about Brito. I also just looked this up, by the way. Brito also has 2 minor league options. I don't suspect that he will be spending as much time in El Paso, if at all, just because, like you said, for Vasquez, the brackets are a little bit wider in terms of possible outcomes. I think for Brito, they're a little bit more set in stone, lower ceiling, higher floor. And I think the Padres, need a Nick Martinez replacement, and I think that they have one here in Johnny Brito. What are your feelings on Mr. Brito?
My thoughts are basically very similar to yours. He is not as sexy. He doesn't have the spin rate. He works like his changeup is his good pitch. But I mean, last year at the major league level, he threw 90 innings of 4.28 ERA. So I don't see why you couldn't expect at least 90 innings at a 4.5 ERA or less, and that's good, right? That's something that you want. I think that of him in a very different way than I would think of the Vasquez or King. Like, he might be able to pitch well in the playoffs type situation because he doesn't have a good pitch. Like, he's not going to be able to carry one pitch probably a lot in the playoffs, even in short innings, unless he can throw that changeup and it's very successful. But it's a good changeup. It's not like an amazing changeup, but he has 5 pitches, all of which are fine. He'll get you innings. We need that. Less exciting to me, but more necessary, I think, than Vasquez.
So I wanted to close out this portion where we're talking about the pitchers, and then we'll finish out the show with talking about Kyle Higashioka. But Longenhagen had a quote in the article that he wrote this morning that was really tantalizing. I combined those 2 words just now. But
Los dos.
Yeah, Los dos. But Longenhagen wrote, quote, "Is the Padres rotation in this moment as nasty or as deep as either Arizona's or Los Angeles's projected rotations? Not quite, but if things click quickly for both Jairo Iriarte and newly acquired Thorp, by midseason it will be very close." And that like that thought is really, really, really intriguing to me. We didn't bring this up, but Longenhagen in the article kind of talks a little bit more at length about Jairo Iriarte and basically says that he's a believer in him and like thinks that he can be a starter at the major league level, which is really, really fantastic for us. Especially because I, am a little bit worried that the Padres are going to rush him up in a relieving role, and that will kind of zap that possibility out that he could contribute in the rotation. But we will see where that takes us. John, we have one player left to talk about in the trade, and that's Kyle Higashioka. Couple things to note about Kyle Higashioka. He is 33 years old and is going to be actually his age 34 season. He was born on April 20th, 420, blaze it, 1990. So, so like I said, he'll be 34 towards the beginning of the season. He was drafted in 2008. John, what were you doing in 2008? I can tell you what I was doing, but what were you doing in 2008?
I was, what was I, like in sophomore year of high school, junior year of high school, maybe?
Hell yeah.
I don't know, crushing it, being awesome.
I was in 8th grade. I was having my bar mitzvah. And Kyle Higashioka was getting drafted in the 7th round by the New York Yankees. So we were all doing similar things at that time. He is a backup who can actually hold his own at the plate, which I mentioned a little bit earlier. He has a 311 xWOBA career, not last year. He has a career 311 expected WOBA. Xander Bogaerts last season was 318. So he was only 7 points off from Xander Bogaerts' performance last season from an expected standpoint. Like I mentioned earlier, he's a great pitch framer. He had some kind of weird things happen in terms of the StatCast defensive statistics. If you were to just look at last year, you would say, okay, this guy's he's a 90th percentile pitch framer, and then like literally everything else, blocking, pop time, catching guys stealing, he's not good to bad. But if you go just 1 year before that, he's above average in all categories. And if you were to go back to 2021, he's above average in all categories except for the caught stealing above average stat that is brand new to StatCast. So you're going to be able to count on him as a pitch framer, which I think is very important. The other thing that I think is important is that he knows the pitchers that came over. He certainly knows. He certainly knows Michael King and Vasquez and Brito. I don't know the extent that he has any familiarity with Drew Thorp per se, but I don't really think it's that's that important. But I think it's really valuable that Michael King will be able to throw to Kyle Higashioka every time he pitches. That was the thing that we saw very recently when Yu Darvish was traded with Victor Caratini to the Padres, and he had that kind of comfortability and familiarity and everything. And so I'm glad that Michael King is going to have that as well. I'm curious, John, kind of what your thoughts are on Higashioka, as he comes into the Padres in this last year before free agency.
My thoughts are basically that he serves an extraordinarily similar value point to what Gary Sanchez would have been expected to add, but for cheaper, right? He's actually a very similar hitter to Gary Sanchez. He has, he only pulls the ball. He pulls the ball at a 46% rate, which league average is 37%. He hits a ton of fly balls. He hits 31.6%. Fly balls, league average is 23.5. He actually has more expected homers over his career if he were to have batted at Petco every time than if he were to have batted at Yankee Stadium every time by 7 home runs, 37-44.
That's
probably because
huge.
so he pulls everything, and our left field is pretty easy to hit a homer over if you yank it right down the line, which is what he does. And he Ks a ton, doesn't walk a lot. So his K rate is 4% higher than average. His walk rate is 3% lower than average, which when it's 22% and 5% are average, that's a lot. So he's very similar to Sanchez. He will pull everything. He'll strike out a lot. He won't walk. And I mean, we were talking about how we do need a couple of those. I mean, maybe a fewer now because we got rid of the guys that are walking in front of him all the time. But he is a guy that when he's there to put the ball in play, and he's either going to strike out or lift a ball to left field. And that's fine for a backup catcher, right? That's like a guy that comes up there and, can hit a home run once in a while. It's fine. That's, whatever. Like, as your backup catcher, and you only have to pay him a couple $1 million rather than the, $8 million, $10 million that Sanchez is likely to get.
Yeah.
Saves you money for pitching or an outfielder or whatever it is that we need. And like you said, he's a good framer, so he is better at framing than Sanchez, but worse at throwing out. He has thrown out 21.2% of runners for his career, 16.6 last year when it was easier. As to put some numbers to it, he gave up 55 stolen bases last year and only 11 caught stealing. And it has to be that the numbers are out on him because I only think he had 75 games or something like that, and yet gave up 55 stolen bases in 66 attempts. So just for reference, Sanchez threw out one fewer stolen base attempt. He threw out 10 compared to Higashioka's 11. But Kyle Higashioka gave up 17 more stolen bases, so 55 versus 11 caught stealing, whereas Sanchez had 38 versus 10%, so he had 21% that he actually threw out. So Sanchez has the better arm, Higashioka's the better framer. But I just put up over the last 3 years Higashioka has put up 4.9 FWAR, but only played in 242 games. So that's per 100 games, which I think we can expect maybe something like 75 to 100 games from Higashioka. He put up 1.65 FWAR over those 100 or per 100 games over the past 3 years. Sanchez had 4.6 WAR per 300 or over 320 games. So his was lower at 1.43 FWAR per 100 games. So, I mean, there's similar numbers, 1.65 and 1.43, but the point is that you wouldn't expect him to be worse than Sanchez, maybe even a little bit better, but certainly similar. And that's fine. Backup catcher, right?
Yeah. I mean, again, he's very much, Padres Twitter said, "Mom, can we have Gary Sanchez?" And AJ Preller said, "We have Gary Sanchez at home." And that is Kyle Higashioka. Like you said, I just want to reiterate it, like why it's super important. He's Gary Sanchez at a third of the cost of Gary Sanchez.
Yeah.
And I think, is going to be frustrating in the way that any catcher at the plate is frustrating. He's not as good of a hitter as you would want him to be. But the important thing is that he is not abysmal, which is what, do you remember how the team changed offensively when we swapped out Austin Nola for Gary Sanchez? Gary Sanchez, who has big flaws as a hitter, but this team seemingly came alive at the plate the minute that we got Gary Sanchez in there as the primary catcher. When it was that little golden window of time when it was Sanchez and Campusano, and we're like, oh my God, wait, there isn't just a black hole at the bottom of the lineup every time. This is crazy. So that is what
Gary Sanchez back cleanup for us sometimes. That happened multiple times where he was I think it was a game in Colorado that I remember going to, and he was batting cleanup, and I was like, I think we might have got a little bit too excited about the fact that he's was in his hot streaks. Because when he was in his hot streaks and was hitting bombs, because he's only going to do a couple things, right? He's going to strike out or hit a bomb. So when he's hitting bombs, and that's exciting. And Higashioka's probably going to be the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. And more importantly to me, he's not going to eat into Campusano's hitting, plate appearances.
Yeah.
Campusano's going to be able to be the primary catcher. You're not going to have situations like last year where Sanchez was DHing. If there's ever going to be a catcher that DHs, it's going to be Campusano. It is not going to be Higashioka. That way we can get Luis Campusano his 450 plate appearances this year that I think he really needs, assuming he stays healthy, to be an impact bat at the major league level, which, he projects to be for us for the next half decade, which is very exciting. That's the end of the trade, John. Do you have any final thoughts about everything we just talked about?
Yeah, sure. So based on Steamer, I added them together. It said that they project 422 innings out of the 4 pitchers that we got, which is probably an overestimate, but still, if it's anywhere close to that, that's obviously very valuable for a team deprived of innings. So great. I do think, just to recap, that kind of Brito and Thorp are maybe a little bit of the less sexy, but maybe more valuable for a long period of time pitchers. More like I compared them to Zach Davies and Chris Paddock, guys that maybe you're not super excited about them starting in the playoffs, but you are perfectly okay with them pitching, in a 4 or 5 spot in your rotation. And people are probably going to like them, I think. I think that both of them will get through innings, which is something that we need. And then I think of King more as like a Seth Lugo kind of addition from last year, although I think that his ceiling is even higher, just because he's nastier, and that he will be a guy who, if we make it to the playoffs, we are not going to be scared about throwing him in at least one time through the order, even as like a third starter. And that's valuable, obviously, if we expect to make the playoffs, which hopefully is the goal. And then Vasquez is a little bit the wild card. Who knows where he'll go? He could be injured game 1, or he could be a nasty like closer type, or at least end of the bullpen type pitcher, or a valuable pitcher. Maybe just giving you 5 innings, 5 and dive, but they're 5 and dive quality innings. Who knows? We'll see what Niebla can do with him. He's kind of the wild card to me. And then a backup catcher, and lots of money to spend, hopefully on outfielders and maybe a number 3 or number 4 starting pitcher.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is the job's not done. This team has a lot of. This team has a third of an outfield now, and I would say this starting rotation, while in better shape, is certainly not complete. No. But this is a great start. This is a really good start. It came at a very hefty cost. I don't think it is going to be particularly pleasant to see Juan Soto hitting in front of Aaron Judge as a Padres fan. I think that, that part of this really sucks. But, I think we've constantly talked about the pratfalls that AJ Preller has kind of committed as a general manager throughout his career. The 9 lives that he seems to have as general manager. But, this was, I think, something that a sober-minded individual in charge of an organization does.
Yeah.
And it's seeing what is there and not kind of what we hope to be there, which I think AJ is kind of guilty of in the past, is really hoping that this lineup that he assembled in 2015, that's entirely right-handed, which is the case again, by the way. So look out for some lefty bats. Is going to be successful, or that Austin Nola is going to be this catcher forever, or it's just these super toolsy kind of guys. And a lot of the stuff we got back in this trade was 40 plus 5 starters / long relievers.
Yeah.
And sometimes you got to take your medicine, and it doesn't feel good in the moment. But like we said, Yankees got 1 marshmallow now. Let's see if the Padres get 2 marshmallows later.
And I will say, I do kind of like it when AJ Preller gets a little bit of a vanilla player, because it's like so against his modus operandi, where it's like usually those end up working. Like Michael Wacha was super boring, and he was very good, right? Ty France, a very boring prospect. He was very valuable. Cal Quantrill, boring prospect, valuable. Eric Lauer, boring, valuable. These guys that are like not exciting at all. He tends to have a good hit rate with. So like Drew Thorp is exciting in that he's young, but in reality, I don't think his ceiling is like that high. But he'll be valuable for us, and it's kind of the same one with Brito, where it's like, cool. He didn't get overexcited and get like somebody who's gonna throw 100 miles an hour and pitch 40 innings. He got guys that are probably like, all these guys threw 100 innings plus last year. That's valuable, right? That's some of them are a little bit boring, but they're going to be helpful.
Yeah. Again, it's like you can make fun of Kyle Hendricks and his 88 mile an hour fastball until the cows come home, but if you look at his Fangraphs page, like he had some years for the Cubs where he really helped them. And if Drew Thorpe turned into Kyle Hendricks, I would be more than happy. More than happy. But who knows? Maybe he turned into something a little bit better than that. All right, John. Well, this was fun. It's good to see you again. Just a reminder for everyone: bullying works. Because certainly Precoda and I
go out there and bully everyone.
Yeah, exactly. So there you go, Craig. Hope you enjoyed that. This has been great. This has been another edition of Positive Replacement. I don't know when we're going to talk to each other next. We have the holidays coming up. I think certainly if the Padres do make a some sort of splash in the offseason in the coming weeks, if we sign a Jung-Hoo Lee, if we assign another exciting player, John and I will be there to deep dive. But until next time, for John Precoda, I'm Raphie Cantor. We will see you next time.